fair.
All right, there we go. So how's it going? Back with Doc Amitay. And today we're going to talk about the new drinking and driving laws in Canada, as well as the APA. And I think more importantly, the APA's redefinition of masculinity. So I guess we'll start with the new drinking and driving laws in Canada. I'm here myself. I think more importantly, Kyle, shut up. All right, there we go. So, new drinking and driving laws. Maybe you're not the best person to talk to, because considering it's a legal issue, but just wanted to get your thoughts on it. It seems to me a little bit draconian. It looks as if it directly contradicts our Charter of Bill of Rights and Freedoms. So I'm just curious of how off base am I with that, from what you can tell.
Well, it depends who you ask. You know, the intent of it is good, I think, or the potential or ostensible intent is good. As far as the potential application, that is extremely draconian, and I think it is violating our Charter of Freedom, because if they say, look, this is the thing. I mean, I wish people would have a nuanced discussion, and I'm about to say what I'm about to say. I'm going to criticize Canada, but before I do, I've got to say, look, you know what? We live in a great country, all things considered. Where else would we want to live? Right, you know, yeah. So, you know, so I don't want to discount that. It is amazing, but you know, I've seen so many cases where there are people who are they just cannot be reformed. They are going to drink and drive all the time, and you know, for every time they get caught, we know they've driven 100 times, you know, really badly drunk, and then somehow they don't get their license taken away till whenever. Like historically, we've seen this. Like the guy's the 20th conviction, and now we're going to take away his license for 6 months or something like that. So I think on one end that was way too lax. It was irresponsible to society. Then, as often happens in Canada or Canadian law and policy, and here's where I'm going to complain about Canada. You know, we finally decide to rectify it. Instead of saying, okay, we need to make 1 or 2 changes here or there, we have this wholesale shift to the other side. Which is what we have now with Bill C-46, which says, you know, in theory, will it ever happen? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I've read the articles where they do cite lawyers who say technically they could go to somebody's house within 2 hours after the person has been drinking and see, you know, like test them for drinking without any cause. Just because they know somehow, maybe someone saw that they were driving, or sorry, that they had driven, let's say, to a bar. This is how crazy it is. So I can go to a bar, park my car, have my wife be my designated driver, get pretty drunk within 2 hours. Hey, I know I can do that. Not too difficult. A couple of shots here or there and pints there. Hey, you've been there firsthand. You've seen it.
It was glorious.
Yeah, except for when I slipped my disc dancing on the table. But aside from that, you know, so I could do all that, yet be responsible and have my wife drive. And according to these lawyers, they're saying that if I have all those drinks within 2 hours of having driven, not driving afterward, but having driven before drinking, that I could be arrested.
Yeah.
Charged for that. And that's where it's like, what the hell? So this is basically it's a thought crime almost, in the sense of it's what was that movie with Tom Cruise?
Minority Report.
Thank you, Minority Report. Okay. So there's a potential. If I'm drinking a lot and there's a car nearby, in theory, I could go in there. So we better get him, because he's had this alcohol, even though he hasn't driven while drunk. And that, I mean, what can you call it, draconian?
Well, and it's interesting too, because it's like it's coming into effect either shortly before or shortly after China, whom Trudeau, our, I guess, leader, he's been quoted saying like he admires China's dictatorship because he can turn the economy on a dime. And it like a month either before or after they come up with their own pre-crime laws, suddenly it's popping up here, which is just it's giving me some pause, some cause to question.
Yeah, and I don't know, because again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know to what degree Trudeau has direct influence on this, but even if he's not directly involved, he is surrounding himself with people who, end up being in positions where they can either write policy or influence or consult with. And the fact is, look, I think at this point, even Trudeau lovers have to come to the realization he's not very deep. He's not.
Like the number of conversations I've had about Trudeau, and it's like the Trudeau lovers are claiming he's this amazing guy. I'm like, look, I had good hopes for him. Like when he got elected, I was like, all right, let's do this. Now I'm like, he needs to go, and he needs to go like 3 years ago for like.
But that's it. When you're not deep, and when you are acting on what you think are good intentions, and sadly, you are virtue signaling. I know people hate that term, but the fact is that's what he's doing. When you're doing that, I mean, that combination leads to bad policy or bad laws, because you're deluding yourself into believing I am doing what's right. And maybe in theory you are, but the world is a complex place. We have to have nuance, and we have to understand the potential implications of behaviors or decisions A, B, and C. And he's not doing that. He's just saying, well, it sounds good. Look, the most benign interpretation I can give is that he's just an idiot, and he thinks it sounds good, and I want to do what's right, and he's too stupid to think about the implications. The more cynical interpretation is he knows this is playing to his base.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know which one is true. I'm not, but I know it's got to be one of those two, because why else would he be doing what he's doing over the last couple of years?
Typically, I don't like to ascribe ill intent to those who could more easily be ascribed stupidity. And it seems like you look at a lot of his quotes about like China, freaking Cuba, all that, how he like admires these leaders. It just, and then to see some of these laws, like the Bill C-13, I think it was, the misgendering.
Right. Yeah, 13 or 16. I always forget the numbers, but yeah.
Yeah, there's so many numbers, man.
Yeah.
We need to start coming out with names for our laws, like the Ninja Report, stuff like that would be fantastic. But yeah, it just seems like the laws that he's implementing are just tightening that grip significant. Like, it's not even small strides. Like you said, like now legally they could come up to your door and charge you for drinking and driving up to 2 hours after you've been driving. Like,
yeah, it's just the principle scares me. And look, and here's where again we have to be careful, because every drunk driver, every person who's ever killed somebody behind the wheel, all thought, well, I'm not that guy. I can have a few drinks and drive. I get that. I'm not saying, hey, let's let everybody drink and drive. But with the blood count, right, the blood alcohol content level that we have, 0.08, it's pretty easy to get to that level, and you can quite easily function very well, with a certain amount of alcohol within you. So I'm not saying, hey, let's drink and drive, but if someone had 1 or 2 drinks at dinner, is completely functional and is getting into their car, and they're not impaired whatsoever, to have it say, well, sorry, it doesn't matter. I think that there should be at least some kind, again, the roadside sobriety tests. They're not perfect, but if somebody is showing a bit of stumbling or whatever, fine. That's sufficient to say we have to question their reflex and everything.
Yeah.
But anyway, everyone's different.
So I'm curious, what is kind of the typical blood alcohol level that would be impairing to somebody?
That's different. I want to say I'm going to be off on this one, because I did research on this. I helped in the research years and years ago when they were doing the 0.08. So I completely forget the numbers. I'm going to make a mistake. I want to say 2 or 3 definitely is impairing, but I don't know at what level. Like, would 1.6 be impaired? I don't know. I know 2 or 3 would for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say for sure. Sorry. I know that most people would be at that level.
Well, most people are going to be falling over at that blood alcohol level.
Yeah. So I don't know those. Like, is it 1.3, 1.4 where we go, okay, now we're concerned? I'm not sure. And I'd have to look it up. Because again, I know when they were changing the laws, like I said, I was helping with a paper on that, and I had to look all that crap up, but that was over 20 years ago. So sorry.
Fair enough. Probably losing a few details at this point. Okay, so let's dive into this APA thing, how they redefine masculinity as toxic. Now, my first question is, what was the previous definition of masculinity? under the APA.
Well, there was none. It was a word that was used just casually, as a lot of other words. We didn't have there was no section in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders about masculinity. I mean, there just wasn't. Simple. Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it was just, if the word was ever used, it was simply used in some context that was probably relevant. We didn't see it as a problem, at least not officially in some manifesto. Okay. Now, when we were talking about, they had the policy, and I looked at it a while ago, the policy on girls and women. All right. And in that case, there could have been masculinity involved somehow. Okay. Like a woman trying to compete with whatever. And like they had that. But it wasn't as if they were saying that masculinity in of itself was bad.
Yeah.
The shift. That's the most pernicious, I wouldn't even say insidious, I think it's quite blatant change, because they didn't even call it toxic masculinity, which I puke when I hear that as well. They didn't even use that term. They literally used the term traditional masculinity.
Yeah.
Right.
Like they actually put the traditional into that phrasing as well, or?
Yeah. And they're saying traditional masculinity is harmful. That's in the document.
Now, did they include femininity in it at all, or is it just? I'm
trying to remember if I read that in that doc. I don't think I said I saw anything about that. The only time they would talk about it, and no, because they were talking about basically. So here's the two big flaws, or 3 or 4 big flaws with the manifesto. Okay, one. Again, the fact that traditional masculinity is considered bad because it means being aggressive, not being in touch with your feelings, being stoic. And we know that health shows that if you're stoic, it can lead to this kind of heart disease and blah, or whatever the disease they're talking about. And, yes, if you are doing something on an extreme level, then it can lead to problems. Being stoic is a strength. If, however, the stoicism prevents you from accessing certain emotions or relating to people in an empathetic way or whatever, that's a problem. But stoicism in of itself is not a problem. It's only on the extreme. Just like saying being compassionate. Anyone who says compassionate is bad would be, I don't know, a psychopath. However, extreme compassion, where you are overlooking a murderer's faults, or whether you are being so compassionate that you're not holding a child accountable for being a jerk or something like that, that would be a problem, right? So the problem with their manifesto is they are looking at extremes over here and pretending that any degree of that is harmful. That's a problem. Second problem, they talk, for example, of course, they're using intersectionality. So they're saying, men have it bad because, and they do cite some stats, which is good. We should let's recognize an individual male in today's society is not, in most average individual males are not thriving. All right. So, let's look at that, and we'll get into the specifics. But so they're recognizing that. Yay. They look at some stats about suicide and deaths on job. So great. Finally, they're talking
all these things that feminists have been denouncing for years. You bring them up and they're like, you're sexist. It's amazing how that happens. Anyways, carry on.
So on one hand, I'm like, hey, great. So they are recognizing this. But when they bring it up, however, if you look in the document, they keep mentioning it as, well, that's a product of the patriarchy. So, hey, man, if you're an individual man, okay, Kyle, it's not your fault individually. We're not holding you responsible. You're just a poor victim, as are all the women and everybody else in society of the patriarchy. They use the patriarchy numerous times in the manifesto, and they write about it as if they're talking about gravity. Okay, like it's just a fact. Don't question it. And that's why men are having problems. So then when they talk about black men, for example, right, or gay men, or any non-white non-white heterosexual cis male, and I'm only using cis facetiously because, I'm not, maybe we'll get into that later, okay? But if you're not any of these marginalized groups, then they say it's even worse for them because blah, blah, the patriarchy.
Yeah.
The problem with this manifesto. And so that's why I have a big problem with it. And here's the thing, and you know this, and I know you've talked about this. Anyone who's been through family court or through, divorce or separation or anything like that, they are now, if you're a man, this will be used against you if you do not act in a way that your ex-partner or a judge deems is responsible. And instead of saying, well, that's my personal opinion, now they can say, this is the APA. They are specifically saying that if a father raises his child to be, you know, aggressive, assertive, stoic, traditional, you're being abusive. And that can be grounds now, because now that it's enshrined in APA wisdom, it could be used against you in family court.
That's freaking unreal. It's amazing. It's not as if the family courts were stacked against men in the first place, right?
Right.
I mean, I fucking almost tried. Well, I came pretty close to considering suicide throughout my entire thing. There's several times where I had to talk myself down. Not like this puts another wall that I would have had to hurdle over, and I like genuinely not sure if I would have made that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, when I say this, I'm the first person who has said, you know, I've talked about this in other cases where I see, let's say, a dad in a change room. I'll just tell this one story I saw, okay? The age that I can't miss, it was a number of years ago. I took my daughter skating, and we're in a change room. And I'm going to say the kids are maybe like 6 and 4 or 5 and 3, something like that, okay? Yeah. And it's at that age where there's a giant discrepancy between the two boys, right? And they look like brothers. I'm assuming they're brothers. And the older kid was just being vicious to this younger kid.
Yeah.
Right? And the father's just letting him go at it. And I'm thinking, you know, like, well, boys will be boys. Well, no, that's, you know, little mini psychopaths. Of course, I'm being facetious. Are going to be mini psychopaths. So it was beyond that. It wasn't a fair fight. And this poor little smaller kid, you could see the terror in his face as this little kid is just almost wailing on him. You know, so I am not a fan of something like that, right? I think
there's a big difference between like stoicism and personal strength and like, what's the word I'm looking for here? And just being domineering.
Right? Yeah, and abusive.
Like there's a whole range of things, like whole spectrum of positions to be in, from fragile to like raging monster who's knocking down buildings and shooting people in the streets. There's just like, there's a little bit of nuance in between there, from what I can tell, you know.
Right. And they're conflating it all. So it all becomes just one big ball of masculinity. And again, people should read the document for themselves. It's not toxic masculinity anymore. It's traditional masculinity. And toxic masculinity in of itself was bad enough, because again, that's where the conflation comes in. They are saying that, you know, stoicism, assertiveness, right? Like all of this is toxic. You know, even sexuality, male sexuality, you know, is toxic. Yet now it's not even that. It's anything traditional is, and it's harmful. They've come out and said it's freaking harmful. So
now I'm curious, how do they get these redefinitions into things like the APA? Because it seems to me like that the APA would be this large network of psychologists, people who study this thing, contributing. How does such a drastic redefinition take place?
So let me tell you. All right. So this applies whether we're talking about masculinity, whether we're talking about transgender, whether we're talking about homosexuality, whether we're talking about any disorder. Okay. It's not as if we all get polled and we're asked, what are your opinions? Right now, I'm part of the Ontario Psychological Association. I think I was APA member many years ago because we had to be, and then we didn't have to be anymore. So I said, I'm not paying any more dues. So I'm only part of the Ontario Psychological Association. And so there'd be something BC, there's a Canadian Psychological Association. So any of these organizations, I was on the board of directors of the Ontario Psychological Association many years ago as the Toronto representative. And so let me tell you how these changes happen. Now, again, the Ontario Psychological Association, we would have no power to influence the DSM or APA or, you know, but we would shift policies within our province. And the fact is, as with almost anything, anyone in any organization knows this. There can be 1,000 people as part of the organization. And what percentage do you think actually are doing the work, doing the legwork, making the changes? It's a tiny percentage. Nobody wants to get involved. They just want to do their own thing. And they have some trust or faith that the people on top, the people who are legislated or voted in to represent them, are doing their job. So all it takes is a few people in either a board of directors or in a committee. So for example, in every disorder, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, gender dysphoria, you just need a couple of experts and they will make the decisions. You get a bit of consensus. They're basing it in theory on research and on clinical experience and on relevant consultations in theory. But the fact is, for any of this stuff, there's a plethora of materials that I can choose from. And if I'm the guy who's doing it, right, I can just say, okay, well, I'm going to look into, and I'm not sure in BC what the equivalent is, but in Ontario, Jordan Peterson made it famous when he made that speech with me. OISE, the Ontario Institute for Studies and Education, OISE is it's part of the University of Toronto. They're I want to make a very derogatory term like stepchild, blah blah, but it's like it's the kid that you put it's the kid you put in the corner when the guests come over. Okay, like that's what it is. And so a number of people on these boards belong to those, did their education through those universities. So they were indoctrinated with this bullshit like patriarchy or privilege and everything like that. So they're the ones who are choosing which resources to use. And if you look at the manifesto, they have a long citation list. A lot of these, if you look at the journals, these are like, women's studies and stuff like that. So that's how the change comes, Kyle. All you need is a couple of people who are really motivated to do this, and they do it, and people aren't overseeing it. And they go, well, that's their department, that's their committee, whatever. And it happened. And so once it happens, think about this. Do you know what percentage of psychologists? I don't know in the APA, but this is pretty consistent in most provinces and states. So I think, I'll be pretty right on this. Do you know what percentage of psychologists currently are women?
I'm going to take a guess, say it's probably between 60 and 85%.
Pretty good. Yeah, very good. It's around 80%. Okay. So the vast majority of the psychologists are women. Therefore, the ones, and when I was on the board of directors, most of them were women. Currently, most of them are women. Our president currently is a woman. She's a fine woman, the Ontario Psychological Association. Actually, I like her. I think she's a good-hearted person. But I don't know her right now. I haven't spoken to her for years. But what if she's one of these activists who has these ideas? And, and she talks to her like-minded folks in their echo chamber, and they decide that we have to make these policies, etc. Which, by the way, is irrelevant, because if the APA said it, which they did, it's part of psychology right now. Once they make those decisions, it's done. So
the APA is like the standard for psychological analysis,
at least in North America. Yeah. Okay. And it goes across the world. Like, everyone knows what the American Psychological Association is. And so it's basically gone from we hope, science-based organization to an advocacy-based organization. But hey, the fact is, and again, I just want to be clear on this. I am very, very, very pro-gay rights. Okay. Even trans rights, as long as they don't go crazy like this has been happening. But I am pro all of these rights. And I teach about in my classes I've given. Actually, I believe, one of my videos is up there that talks about this. But the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, in the early 1970s, when they were doing good and they were actually changing homosexuality from a mental disorder to not one, okay? The whole way that it happened, it was a lot of advocacy, right? And activism, and not that much science. The science came later. But originally, when it was decided, there wasn't that much research done. And the research that was there was bad research. And it basically said gays were crazy because it was bad research. Okay. So, so it's not like it's suddenly changed. There's been advocacy for many, many years. And I don't know if our checks and balances are as good as they should be. Normally, they have been. Normally, there's been blowback. There's been a few psychologists who stand up and go, look, this is wrong. All right. The DSM-5 that came out 5 years ago, or 5 years ago, when it came out, people were raising the alarm bells going, there's some of the stuff that they're trying to propose is preposterous. And we were able to fight back. So it's not like we're a rogue organization, but with this gender shit that's going on, we just dropped the ball. That we just let those activists, run rampant.
It seems to be the case. Just so that the audience knows, what is the DSA?
DSM. Sorry, I said it earlier. Sorry, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Okay. So it's basically our Bible. It's what we use to diagnose somebody. It says what's a disorder and what is not. Okay, and that's in North America, because in Europe they use the ICD. Oh my God, the International. I should know what C stands for. I'm blaming the meds from the heart surgery. Okay, D, I'm pretty sure is disorders. I can't believe I'm blanking. Oh my God. So ICD is at the 10 right now. I'm pretty sure. And now they have in the UK, I think they have NHS. So these are the equivalents of the DSM. And when I fight with, here's the thing, when I fight with gender activists and transgender activists here, and they're saying gender dysphoria is not a mental health issue, it's not a disorder, I go, yeah, it's still in the DSM. It's there. If you have gender dysphoria, if you're feeling almost suicidal, or you're crawling out of your skin because you believe you're in the wrong body, or this is not your right sex, etc., yeah, that's a disorder. And they go, well, not in the ICD or the NHS. So there in Europe, where they're even more of activists, they've changed it. So now it's not just saying that being transgender isn't a mental health issue. Now having gender dysphoria is not even a mental health issue. Okay. So again, I'm just showing you, and I don't want to make a big rant on trans people, but I'm saying these changes that go on, these are done by people, and it's not science. I mean, science is involved, but it's selection of science that suits their ideology and agenda. So that's what's happening, and this is what happened with the APA recently.
That's astounding. It's like, and it seems to be permeating everywhere too. That's the other thing. Like, actually, it was interesting. I had the exact same conversation with two friends yesterday, both women, which I don't know if it's relevant, but it is kind of interesting to note, because this is conversations that traditionally I'd only had with other men, talking about how, like, these political things, such as like the transgenderism, the gender conversation that's going on, like up until Trump, just about, these conversations didn't really demand our attention. And it's like, now we just can't put them down.
Right.
And it's very curious that, like, there's such a drastic, it's almost as if we're trying to get rid of any sort of definition, like gender dysphoria, which, I mean, I'm just saying, if you feel like you're in the wrong package, chances are there's something. I'm not saying I know what the treatment is. Transitioning could be the thing. It could be the thing. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist nor a doctor. I don't pretend to know much of anything. But, like, the fact that it's being pushed as, no, this is the thing. Like, and I'm curious to see how the APA's new redefinition is going to affect, because we were talking a while ago about the law in Ontario, where it's like, if your child says they're transgender, and I don't know if this has been scrapped since before, but if your child says that they're transgender and you reject that, you can have your kids pulled for child abuse. Yeah.
No, it hasn't been scrapped yet.
It hasn't been scrapped. Okay, so then it seems to me like this would be something that would aggravate that in a fairly drastic manner.
Well, for sure. Because, I mean, by definition, if you're trans, for example, you are not, if you're a boy who thinks you're a girl, you're definitely not traditional masculinity. Like, I don't know if there's some kind of connection here that coincidence or whatever. But it is very scary that this could happen. And by the way, I should say something else. I don't know what the other provinces are. I'm not sure out in BC, but Child Protective Services, or in our case, Children's Aid Society, up until last year, or maybe now it's a year and a bit, the cutoff of the child was 16. So once the child hit 16, they were not, unless they were shown to have, developmental delay that made them, not functioning much lower. If a kid's 16, they were not under the purview of the Children's Aid Society. They changed that to 18. So now, a child who may be, trans, who thinks they're trans, and we know it's around 16 that a lot of these kids are suddenly discovering their transness for the first time ever, right? Yeah. So at this point, Children's Aid, and I don't know if it's coincidence, but now Children's Aid can become involved with the family if they don't fully accept. So, and, I hate to keep beating this, but it's happening more and more. A 16-year-old child who's uncomfortable with her sexuality, and how many 16-year-old girls aren't uncomfortable with their sexuality, right? And if she has other mental health issues like depression, anxiety, autism, right?
From what I understand, most of those things have been on the rise for the last little while here.
They have been on the rise, and the correlation between them and this rapid onset gender dysphoria is over like 25% or so. So if a lot of them are having these struggles, and they've just hung their struggle on this, trans, okay, rather than saying, well, maybe I'm just not your traditional woman or female or whatever, right? So if they're 16 and they say that, and the parents like, but are you sure, honey? You've never shown any signs, et cetera, et cetera. Then suddenly children's aid can get involved. They can take the child away. They can facilitate this. It will happen. I mean, I've seen children taken away for much less than that. Okay. So it is very concerning. Now with gender ideology, if a boy says, I don't want to play sports, like, think about this. If a dad, I mean, it doesn't have to be 16, it can be any age, right? But imagine this. If a child, you've got your kids, right? It's a tough balance where you want to push the kid enough that they just don't give up right away, right? You want to play piano, play sports, whatever, give it a shot before you suddenly say, well, it's too difficult, I want to give up. So you want to push them a bit, not to the point where you're abusive. Well, now with traditional masculinity, if a father is trying to push his child into sports, and let's say the kid's really good at, baseball, and but he had a bad game, and he wasn't able to handle the stress well. He goes, that's it, fuck it, I quit. And the dad's like, come on, no, really, really try. The mom can turn around and go, look at him. He's pushing this traditional masculinity. Maybe my boy just doesn't want to be this, physical specimen that his dad wants him to be. Like that's what is potentially gonna happen, whether it's a young child or a 17-year-old.
That's the more that I think about this, the more that it seems to be pulling. It legitimately seems to be all linked to this kind of degradation. I really hate using that phrase because I mean it's associated with other things, but it seems to be this degradation of any definitions or anything that you're not allowed. Men traditionally protect. That's the traditional masculine, and it's to vilify that, and it's. There was what was it? A couple of days ago, I was just watching. It's like the cure to bad men is not get rid of masculinity. It's to treat the men in such a way that there are good men that crop out of it who can push back against the bad men. And it seems to me that we're just on this fucking full-on sprint to this. Get rid of anything male, anything protective, anything. It's almost like suicide.
Well, it is cultural suicide, or species suicide if you think about it. Because I mean, we're so fortunate to be in this great country of ours where we're not fighting for our lives. We don't have hordes of forces and aliens attacking us, or alien forces or attacking us. But if that ever does happen, who do we want to protect us? Some non-traditional male to come in and say, hey guys, come on, let's talk about it. Wow, this must be it. I know your father didn't treat you right, so this is why you're coming after us. And that's not going to happen. We need to have this. And you're absolutely right. Whether we're talking about defending a country, or whether we're talking about males modeling for other men, whether it's men in the company or as a father, right? Modeling how to be a good, strong male. And look, I've got 3 daughters, right? I'm modeling for them how to be a good, strong person. Yeah. Right? Because I don't. But it's going to look different. I'm just going to say, sorry. I was just going to say it's going to manifest itself differently. If I had boys, I'd be teaching them the same lesson as being strong people. Yeah. But by nature, it would look differently if they were a male than if they're a female. There's nothing wrong about that.
Well, the thing that I'm curious about, it's my boys. One of the lessons that I'm really teaching my oldest, Jeremy, is he much like myself when I was younger, very aggressive. I mean, he's 5, so I mean, kind of goes with the territory. But I spend a lot of time explaining to them, we use our strength to help people. We use our strength to help people. We don't hurt people. We try to help people. We defend people. That's what we do. And I'm curious if these new APA rules, coupled with, like, say, the child protection or the child aid that you have there, would actually warrant me getting my kids pulled.
Well, and I'm not, again, I don't want anyone to watch this and go, oh, he's fear mongering, you know, he's being hyperbolic or anything. Look, I've done over 500 assessments for children's aid societies in the courts. I think I know what I'm talking about. I'm a qualified parenting expert, okay? And I don't use hyperbole. So I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know if the children would be pulled from you, but I could truly see. I say this with 100% certainty. So let's say Jeremy sees, let's say he's 8 years old or even 5, okay? I'm going to go with 8. All right, he's 8 years old, and he sees some kid picking on another kid, right? Maybe a girl or just another kid who's smaller. And so he does the right thing. He stands up to him, and he goes, stop it. And the kid's aggressive. So, you know, Jeremy, he pushes him. And I don't advocate violence in any way, okay? I'm not a fan of that. I'm not, you know, I don't believe in it. But when it's necessary, right. And 8-year-old standing up to protect another kid, again, he's not going to talk the other kid down. So if he did push him, and then the school got involved and they called you up and they said, you know, your son he needs medication because he's so aggressive. And you said, but wait, I taught him to do that. I taught him to stand up for what's right. He was protecting this child. I can guarantee you that I don't know if they would actually call children's aid, but I guarantee you that would come up saying, you know, Kyle, that this is something that we don't teach. You are, you know, we know you have good intentions, but you're teaching your child to be aggressive, etc. And then they would you know, cite this thing about the APA. Do you not know that the APA talks about how this is going to hurt your child? I promise you that allusions to Children's Aid Society would be made at that time, if not actual referral. Promise.
That's utterly terrifying, if I'm being totally honest with you as a parent, because, like, you know, like I mean, I come from at least a family where it's like, if somebody's doing something and hurting people, and I mean, I've had my issues in the past where I've been the bad guy for sure. I don't think anybody can honestly say that they haven't, but like, I was taught, like, if somebody's hurting somebody, you stand up to them, like, you know, like, to the point where it's like, it's ingrained in my head. If people come to this country to attack us, say in the case of war, I'm going to war, right? That's not even a question for me. I'm just, all right, I guess it's time to go kill some people, right? And it's not like I want to, but to see that is being twisted in such a way where it's, I have the drive to protect, you know, like, I'm very nationalistic. Fucking love Canada, like, proud Canadian. Half of the people, actually most of the people in the chat room right now, are all Americans who have very strongly pushed for me to become American, like, to the point where a couple of them said, it was like, I'll be your, like, sponsor, right? I'm not doing that. I know that we got issues, and I know that I want to protect the country, but, like, it seems to me that this APA is going to directly, like, pathologize that whole mindset. And actually, it seems to me that it already has in a lot of ways, now that I'm really thinking about it. Because, like, what was it? Who said? It was Macron. Said the nationalism is opposed to patriotism or something like that.
Yeah, I know. There was something about that. Yes.
Where it's like, to be proud of your country and to want to defend your country is just like a pathology, right? And that is so concerning, especially with the way that I'm raising my boys, because it's like, yeah, no, you stand up to the people, you stand up to the bullies. Don't be a bully, but be fully capable of being a monster. It's why I put my kids in martial arts.
Right. And of course, martial arts will teach them the discipline that they need to contain the monster, so that if they have to unleash it, they will only do it at that time. But the rest of the time, they know it's there. And I'm going to cite Jordan Peterson in a second. But I want to say, it's the same thing when you talk about, like, with nationalism and so on, having pride in your country. If you have so much pride in your country to the point of jingoism, to the point of not recognizing when your country does wrong
Yeah.
and blindly following it, then of course that's a problem. But this is the same giant brush that, broad brush that they're painting everybody with, and saying that having pride in your country is a bad thing, conflating it once again with a type of jingoism, or there's just this aggressive hostility or whatever, versus saying, no, I want to have an identity of my own country. I want to feel that this is what it means to be Canadian. I want to be proud of it, and if I have to fight for it, I'll do it.
I've been having that argument so much lately. Like, I got the Canadian Bill of Rights right there on my wall. Right? Like, I'm nationalistic. I'm proud of this country. We've done some amazing things. Vimy Ridge is like a legendary story.
Right.
And, it's where I've had people like, and even trying to bring up like where Trudeau said, oh, Canada doesn't have a core identity. It's like fuck, we don't. For one, we're the fucking snow monkeys. Like, we live in an environment that tries to kill us. We're a tough group of people just by our nature, and you have these conversations. I've had it where they're like, anytime somebody brings up the Bill of Rights, they've lost the argument. I'm like, that is the fucking argument. That is the thing that we're trying to defend.
Right.
And it's just like that. It's very interesting to see that the idea of defending that which you love, protecting that which you love, is being pathologized in a literal document that is going to govern the mental health of indefinitely. Like, I was going to say, for at least a decade, because I don't know how long it takes the stuff to like change.
Right. Well, let me tell you how it's going to most directly, and it's already happened. So it's not even like I'm not predicting this as a genius. I'm reporting it as somebody who has two eyes and can read and has seen what's happened. Okay. I wish maybe I did predict it back then. I don't know. All right. Who knows? But let me just take what you just said. When you're talking about, let's say, protection or whatever else, what it all boils down to is allowing people to tap into what makes them unique, what gives them purpose, what gives them drive, what gives them a sense of identity, and whatever else, whatever that happens to be. Let's hope it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. Protecting others is a good thing, right? Again, having nuanced pride in your country is a good thing, as opposed to blind pride, right? Yeah. Well, for boys, we cannot deny this. The science is, you can't, I can't think of a word here. It's indisputable. The science is indisputable. Boys are more physically aggressive than girls. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a fact. And it's not a cultural. I mean, this culture pushed us more in that direction. Yes. But the fact is, that's in our fucking nature.
Yeah. Well, it's cross-cultural.
It's cross-cultural, cross fucking species. Okay. Yeah. Right. So here's the thing. And again, I don't know what it's like in BC, but I know in Ontario and other provinces, other states, more and more and more, they have de-aggressified, as in my own word, okay, schools. So it's got to the point where not only, do they take out competitive sports, not only are there no more scores or whatever, but there are some schools, and I'm not sure, I can't say this in Ontario because I don't know if it's happened here, but I've heard about other schools where tag is outlawed. Okay.
Yeah. I've seen several cases of people, like kids playing, like going like pew pew, and then getting
God forbid. Well, see, cowboys and Indians. Not only is it violent, but it's also culturally inappropriate. It's racist. Yeah. Okay? And cops and robbers. Well, you better be the robber because we don't know all cops are bad. The robbers are the good guys now. Like, what the? In any event, this is the way in which a boy, girls too, but more so boys, let off steam. Mm-hmm. Right? We're wondering why there's so much ADHD, and a lot of it's not real ADHD. It's just more like, it's poor management of the children, and it's no coincidence that it's boys, much more likely to be diagnosed. Okay, right. Because we're not having that athletic component, that letting off steam, right? So then they can go into class, and it's kind of okay. Now I can sit and listen. So they're not having that. Number one. Number two, let's not deny this. For a boy, girls as well, but for a boy, your physical abilities helps determine your social status.
Yep.
As social animals, we need to understand the hierarchies that are there. We need to understand where we fit in. And if I'm not a great baseball player, either I try to find another sport, or I find another means by which I'm going to either attract girls, make myself popular, build self-esteem, whatever it is. And when you take out one huge component of it, which is the athleticism, the physicality, when you take that out, you are robbing boys of this part of what makes them a fully functioning individual.
Yeah. Well, like on that note, like just an anecdotal example is like, I never feel more centered and more grounded and more like emotionally stable, to put it bluntly, as I do when I've just gotten out of the MMA gym and I've been fighting for a solid like hour and a half, 2 hours, you know? And I mean, it's been a few months since I've been there due to some, you know, life happening, but you know, quite literally, I go in there for an hour, I come out, I'm much more friendly, I can think more clearly. I'm not nearly as distractible, and that's been a struggle for my entire life. I'm also less likely to smoke weed.
Right, and I was just, I was just going to say that I was going to say what you did with the being grounded, being centered, being, you know, all these other great traits. I was going to say other people could do that through smoking weed, because what you're doing is you're shifting your brain chemistry in that moment. So why would they deprive you of a way of doing it while you are a child or whatever? So when the kids are doing sports or whatever, no, if someone says, well, that's just making them more aggressive. No, well, some kids may be, but they would be that way anyway. Most kids, once they've done that athletic thing or whatever it is, whatever they find that helps change their brain. Because if we all had, and one day I'm sure we will, one day these phones will be able to do this, put it to our head and it'll give us a freaking fMRI, okay? But if I take an fMRI of you before you went into the gym and during and after, we would see, oh my God, this looks like this guy just went through 6 months of therapy, right? Because the brain chemistry changes. It's healthy. It's how we change. We put ourselves into different damn mental states. Yeah. And if that's how you find it, fuck anybody who says no, that's the wrong way to do it. That's wrong. No, you should learn to play chess. Why can't you become calm by playing chess, asshole?
I would actually be very interested. I don't know if we can set this up to actually like test that theory out and like maybe make a video of that, of like the step by step, you know, go into the gym, go hit. I don't know if you have access to those kind of equipment.
Unfortunately, I don't. Yeah, I have in the garage. Sorry, it's broken. I'm having it fixed. I'm stuck with just the CT.
We'll get a guy on it. Right. But if we were able to get access to that kind of equipment, that would be a very interesting thing to show. Maybe as a means of pushing back on this, because
I'm gonna ask my colleagues. All right, I'm gonna put that out there and see if anyone does have access to that. Okay, and there may even be research. I'm sure I know there is research that looks at, you know, whether they're doing that. There's a guy, I forgot his name. He was on Joe Rogan maybe a year and a half ago. He talked about flow, and they were looking at surfing. And what it did to the brain and how it was helping people with post-traumatic stress disorder. Surfing, it's the same idea. You're doing something, a physical activity or mental activity or something else that puts you in a healthier state. And we're depriving children from the beginning, very days. And at the same time, of course, not only are we depriving them of one way of being healthy, both physically and mentally, but at the same time, we're also bringing this into their lives. Right. So now we're shifting from this to this, and this is unhealthy, Yeah. And by the way, sorry.
Oh, well, it's like I've been actually seriously considering getting a flip phone because, like, I've had issues with this thing taking over, like with driving. Right. I can put it into the back of the car, and then I just have to go back, pull over, and I'm hitting it like a fucking crack fiend, or else if it's beside me when I'm driving, I just can't help but grab the fucking thing. And ever since I've had my phone shut off, right, it's basically a mobile computer at this point. I'm finding myself like actually feeling healthier.
Yeah. Yeah, because what it does is, this is the part, and I've talked about this many times, but it's so important for people to recognize that the problem with the phones, one of the main problems, that's why it's different than computers or anything else. Most important, I would say the biggest problem with a mobile device, and that's why you're experiencing this, that you're using it as a computer rather than as something that gives you access to the internet, is that unless as a computer, you're still checking it all the time, but it's not the same thing. With the internet, we are constantly looking for a new stimulus.
Yeah.
And we get hooked on that. And what we're doing is we're depriving ourselves of the other thing that makes us uniquely human. Maybe certain primates, probably orcas, you know, and maybe a few dolphins, they might do this too. But humans are one of the few species where we have the capacity to introspect and reflect. And when you don't have the time to do that, we don't even know what it's doing. All I know is that's part of what made us human. That's part of our hundreds and thousands of years of evolution, right? And we're not doing it anymore because from a young age, we're teaching people, when you have that downtime, go here, externalize, don't internalize. And that's destroying us. And I just, before I forget, sorry, Kyle, I just want to throw this out there because I mentioned Jordan Peterson. I want to go back to what he said earlier. Just it's one of the most genius things that he's ever said. And I don't care if people like him or not. I don't think everything he says is perfect. I don't agree with everything he says. But clinically speaking, I know what he says is sound. And this one thing that he said maybe a year ago on Joe Rogan, we should play a drinking game every time I say Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson. All right. But here's the thing. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember him saying this. I think it was on Joe Rogan. It might have been another talk where he talked about the meek shall inherit the earth.
Yeah.
Okay. And or it might even be talking about this Jocko. Is it Jocko Williams, the big ex-Marine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it might have been with him that he was talking. I'm not sure, but Jocko is the perfect example of this, where the meek does not mean the weak or the shy or whatever. The meek was a translation meaning that a man who has his sword sheathed, that the meek was an interpret saying that he decides not to unsheath it. And so what the saying, and whether it's the original intention or with this is Jordan's interpretation, was that the man who knows that he could very easily pull it out and cause chaos and wreak havoc and hurt people, who says, no, I'm choosing to keep it in here. I have the potential to do it, and I don't. And that's exactly what you were talking about with raising your children or doing martial arts, where I want to become a potential killer, and I choose not to be. Right. Yeah. Where you say, I have a history. I have a history too. And, I'm not religious, so it's not like I'm trying to make up time to whatever cosmic force. But the last many years when I've grown up, I didn't grow up in my 20s. Okay. When I grew up at some point in my life, became a better person, I'm trying to make up for lost time. I'm trying to to give back to the universe. I could very easily be a bad person, especially now at this stage of my life, doing what I've done. I have access to ways of making life miserable for a lot of people. Yeah. I choose to do the opposite. And this is what, whether you're a man or a woman, this is what we should be promoting. And fuck the APA for basically promoting the opposite. They're literally, the last number of years, educators, psychologists, policymakers, they're basically saying, no, everyone's victims. We need to have a select few people, the government or whoever, they will protect us, and everybody else, we need to just pat them on the head and say, we're so sorry. We're so sorry for the ills. We're not going to make you stronger. We're just going to coddle you and protect you. Don't worry. You don't have to be strong. We're there for you. And I know I'm exaggerating, but that's it.
And honestly, the scariest people I've ever met in my entire life were the people who were weak of spirit, like the emotionally unstable, the ones who lash out, the ones who, and I've been that person, so it's not even like I'm placing judgment on other people there. It's like the scariest people I know, ever known, were just weak-spirited people.
Yeah.
People who could not handle their emotions, could not handle reality. I may be wrong, but I feel like that was the thing that masculinity kind of buttressed against. It's like, no, calm your shit. It's not that bad. Calm yourself. It's not that bad. And if it is that bad, then be able to push the red button and nuke it all. Be capable of that.
Right.
Just don't do it.
Yeah. And again, and I don't want to say toxic masculinity because fuck those people who use that term, but the bad men were the ones who didn't have that self-control. And they, you know, the good men are the strong ones, have that control, and women as well. I'm going to bring this phone up again because I just want to bring this up because that stupid Gillette ad, right? You know, is this the best a man can be? Somebody, I never take credit for something that's not mine. So somebody, I think it was online, I saw a comment to some idiot who wrote a column about it, he's responding to other people on Twitter. But when I come up to him very politely and go, look, just so you know, you're wrong, and, you know, contact me if you want to be educated. He writes for reason.com. And apparently other articles, he was actually pretty reasonable. But in this article, he was basically saying, you see, the fact that men are getting so upset about Gillette ad is the reason why we have to have this ad. Somebody wrote this. It's one of the most clever things that they said. And I must be easily impressed because I've been repeating this now, which is this. They said, imagine that there was a feminine hygiene product ad that came out and said, women, is this the best that you can be? Women, stop making false rape allegations. Stop making lies against your ex.
They would lose their shit. They're marching behind anti-Semites. Like,
but again, so why is it any different for men? Think about that, right? And there's nothing. There's no difference whatsoever. Hey, women, stop. It's funny because we're talking about the phone in, right? This is how, right? This is how girls physically, well, not physically. This is their analog to physical. We know for a fact, all the research shows this. Girls from a young age are masters at destroying people psychologically, right?
Yeah.
All interpersonal bullying. And now with the internet, it's far more girls than boys, aside from like asshole trolls. But we're talking about like true people who know each other. The girls do it far more than boys. And they're not talking about that. So where's the toxic femininity in that, right?
Well, yeah, it's a fair point.
Well, that, you know, and again, I use toxic femininity, but anyway, so yeah, so I just want to throw those up before I forgot them, because you know, it's people have to look at these things with far more determination and nuance. Nuance is the word. It's going to be the overused word of 2000 and something, but it has to be. We have to embrace that word.
Well, absolutely, because we've, at least my generation seems to have just stripped context out. Right? Like, people are feeling so righteous in their ignorance, like morally righteous. A prime example of that is Alexandria.
Oh God,
whatever the fuck her name is.
Yeah, right.
I apologize to her if she ever sees this when she gets offended, because she will. Where she was like, facts aren't as important as being morally right, or something similar to that.
Right.
And I'm just like, you can't have any measure of morality without the facts to buttress it.
Yeah. Like,
you just can't. How are you going to have any form of morality if you don't know the cause and effect?
Exactly.
And that's,
well, morality is a patriarchal concept, don't you know? You know,
I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, and that's why, look, Ben Shapiro, I disagree with him on so many policies and this and that. And he and I, if we were at high school together, we'd be in the opposite ends of the schoolyard. Like, we're just so different in many ways.
Yeah.
But I have to always, like, he calls that shit out for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And again, I can disagree with him about a bunch of different things, but when his argument is sound, right?
Yeah.
When he criticizes people, when his critiques or arguments are sound, you can't argue with that. And, you know, and that's why he's such a refreshing person to me, because I don't agree with a lot of his politics or this or that. But I just like to see I like to see him call people out for the bullshit, because we know most of the other in the media won't, because AOC, Alexandria or whatever, Cortez or whatever she is, you know, she's the media darling. You know, if she were older, she'd be the next president. She just can't run yet. But if she could, she would.
Mm-hmm.
She's their Justin Trudeau.
Oh my God, you are so right. Although there's been descriptions of her as the left's Trump.
Why? Because she lies so much?
No, because, okay, so she lies, right? But she doesn't care that she's been lying. Yes. She, despite the fact that she's lying, the left doesn't particularly care, simply because she's on their side.
Yep.
Right. So when it's kind of like how you can see Trump putting like he'll just say things that are just blatantly false. And he's like, oh, it's going to be tremendous, right? And then she is the same thing. It's like, she's like, yeah, places have had 70% income tax before. It's been fine. Look back at this, but never mind that there were like fucking tax loopholes out the ass back when it was up to 70% in the US. But it was like, she'll say things that sound really good without anything to back it up. And then the left seems to love it, which is kind of what Trump does in a lot of ways. And I've grown to support Trump simply because I see the net good coming out of what he's doing.
Right.
But, you know, I'm not going to deny that there's like big issues with him.
Yeah. The closest I can get is I say, like, I have a hard time supporting him only because I know his personality, and I have a hard time with that, and so it worries me. But what I do say is, and I've said this many times, originally when I saw Trump gaining popularity, I, like most people, just assumed it was a certain type of person, right? Yeah. And now I can clearly say, without doubt, because I've spoken to many people who support him, no, I've spoken to many Trump supporters, and I know why they're supporting him. And it's not because they're racist, not because they're ignorant or stupid or, you know, hateful or anything else like that. There's a reason they are. And some of his stuff, I think, is maybe just coincidence. Some of the stuff he's doing turns out to be maybe for the good. Okay, at the very least, I can say some of the stuff he's attacking deserves or needs to be attacked, needs to be questioned, challenged.
A good analogy is that he's like the court jester. He just keeps asking questions like, why are we in Syria? You know, and he'll ask that publicly, and everybody else, because the Kurds, because Turkey and Russia, and he's like, but I mean, we've been in there for like 20 years, and it hasn't done, like, why are we there? We should probably pull out of there, shouldn't we? And then all the people are like going, oh, war is evil. All of a sudden, they're just shouting from the rooftops, we can't leave Syria. We need to put more troops there. Get it? I'm like,
yeah, so we need to put more troops there. And then we're going to complain about how much money is being spent on the military.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways, you assholes. You really can't. So, yeah. Well, it's maddening times. And I've got to say that when I went on Sunday to the Quillette event, you know, Quillette's first meet and greet, get together, whatever. And as Claire Lehman said, as a woman from Australia, and in January, that's the Australian summer, right? So as a woman from Australia holding the first Quillette event in Toronto, you know, freezing cold Toronto, a little bit of irony there. But I got to tell you, that heartened me. It gave me some hope because I met a bunch of people. So I met some, you know, I spoke with some of the top names, and I spoke with a bunch of people who just happen to be supporters of Quillette. They're not contributors, they're not lawyers or anything else. They're just supporters. And seeing all those people, you know, getting together and, you know, being reasonable, intelligent, nuanced people, it gave me some hope. And I just hope that more and more people join in. I hope she doesn't get shut down. You know, or Quillette doesn't get shut down, and I hope people take heart. This is the way to move forward. Mm-hmm. It really is. And everyone was saying, I spoke to so many people, and they all said the same thing. It's like, I don't agree with all of the pieces. Some of the pieces drive me mad, right? But that's good. It's a forum for differing views. How archaic is that? You know, like,
yeah, that's the definition of enlightenment. You're just shining a light on different perspectives and stuff like that. And we need more of that.
Oh, we do. Speaking of shining a light, by the way, because I don't know if people are, I know you've got this. I don't know if I can do it, but I know that you have access to seeing people writing in. And I know that every time you come on, people are chiming in. Has anybody chimed in on something that's, you know, that you think we can jump off of, or have questions or anything like that?
I will put it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
And then while they're doing that, I'm going to quickly run to the bathroom.
Okay. Yeah. It's just that every time, you know, I remember the other few times, like, you know, toward the end, people start, and it's like all these great questions and comments are coming up. And I thought, okay, why don't we do it now and see if anyone.
That would be Good times. Let's let this cycle for a minute, and then I will be right back, and we'll see.
Okay. So what do I do? Do I sit here on live TV and talk?
I don't know. Do a dance.
All right. Call the TV. Yeah. So anyone who's watching, I hope that if you have questions, throw them out there. I've been on it before. My only concern is I hate repeating myself over and over. And I've done so many different podcasts and radio, TV interviews, lectures in my classes. So it all blends together. So I apologize if I'm repeating myself. Some of the stuff I don't apologize for because it has to be said over and over. And if you're just joining in, we were talking earlier about the APA, or the American Psychological Association. And the funny thing is this: when I fight with people who, who are kind of going too far extreme, whether they're trans, whether they're trans allies, whether they're social justice warriors, whatever, the funniest thing is they always point to new changes in the APA or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders or some other policy, or Europe. And they say, look at this. They've said, suddenly these organizations are now being used as the be all end all. Yet a few years before that, when they were saying things that these same people didn't like, it's, you can't trust doctors, you can't trust science, you can't trust psychologists. It's amazing how they suddenly flip to go, okay, yeah, no, now they're the authorities. For years and years, they weren't the authorities because you didn't like what they had to say. Now they say what you like, and now you're deferring to them. Fuck you. Not you, Kyle.
I mean, I have my moments. I'd understand if you said we're saying that. Doesn't really look like anybody has any questions. I think we might have covered it all. I mean, we got people saying the APA is corrupt. One of them saying that Trump is definitely an Enneagram type 8. I don't know what that means.
Is it what?
An Enneagram type 8.
An Enneagram type 8.
ENNEAGRAM. There's EnneagramInstitute.com. I don't know.
Okay, right. Yeah, might be worthwhile, but I don't know what it is.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, why don't we call her good with this? This was an enlightening, albeit terrifying conversation.
Okay.
And I'd like to get in touch with you again in a couple months. See if anything is what's the word I'm looking for here? See how this develops, both with the drinking and driving and more importantly, the APA, because this seems to be tied directly with things like the family, children aid, seems to be tied with the trans thing. Sergeant says, what is he supposed to do at work when they start pushing the gender thing? He had to recently give his preferred gender. He, of course, said attack helicopter. So I insisted they refer to him as that. I mean, I would just keep doing the attack helicopter thing.
I would as well, because I don't want him to lose his job over it. The only thing he can do, and this is important, because this is where it went from the classrooms and just a few leftist, Marxist, idiotic, living in their ivory bunker asshole professors, and now it's as has been warned for years, it's permeated into other areas of society. I say the same thing I say to everyone, which is find a few allies within your work. Get a few people, because again, without nuance, if he says attack helicopter, all of a sudden people are going to assume that one phrase, they're going to assume this means he must be A, B, C, and D. And he's no longer, what was his name? Sergeant, did you say?
Sergeant Peterson.
Sergeant Peterson, okay. So he's no longer Sergeant Peterson. He's this caricature. He's this person that they can put into a box. And the way you combat that is finding a few people who would see you as who you are. And they may not stand up for you. They probably won't. But if you can get a bit of goodwill among a few people, it makes it harder for somebody else from the top or from the side to come in and undermine you. So that's what you got to start doing. Don't be careful. Don't do it facetiously, because then they're going to say, yeah, look, he's just an asshole. I mean, the attack helicopter, go ahead with that if you want. But I would try to just ask questions like, where's the evidence that, telling you my pronouns has any benefit? Like, simple. Like, what is the purpose of doing that? In fact, what you're doing now is you are now seeing me as a pronoun or as a sex or as a gender rather than who I am, what relevance is it? Like, truly,
Well,
because we want to make other people feel comfortable. Well, if you do, then let them correct you when they do, because you know what? There's a lot of people who aren't trans, yet they happen to look different from their sex. You know, there's some guys who don't look like men, and you think, you know, or voices. I've had conversations on phones with people whose voice does not match their sex. And so what? You make a mistake, and what do? They do what they've been doing since the beginning of fucking time, which is they correct you. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a microsecond of discomfort. Now it's it's taken care of. So
the number of times that I have driven past what looked like just a smoking hot babe and looked back only to see that it's a guy with long hair and tight jeans, don't care to admit.
Why didn't he just have a pronoun on the back of his shirt?
Right? Like, let's get the gender symbols on every back of everyone's clothes. You know. Now, here's something that just occurred to me. So we've been watching the rise of identitarianism over the last 5 years. And it seems to me that this is an extension of the identity politics that have been taking place, especially like since at least 2016. But I think longer than that, because I'm pretty sure Obama was going off about how he's a feminist, and there was a whole spiel that he did on that at one of his addresses.
Yep.
So it seems to me that this is like directly correlated, like the APA's new redefinition of or not even redefinition, just the defining of masculinity.
The pathologizing of masculinity.
Yeah, the pathologizing of masculinity is like a direct correlation to that. I have concerns because, like, I'm genuinely concerned that we're going to be going into a fairly dramatic conflict, at least in the Western Empire, in the next few years. And how does one push back on that?
It's the only thing you can do is whatever your tiny circle is, whatever your realm is, you know, whatever voice you have. I mean, that's the only way you can do it. Is, again, as I said earlier, like, you build allies and you try to get a few people and try to show them the madness. What you have to do is again, it's so hard to break through the delusion of virtue. Like, but you know, I'm just trying to do good. I want to make trans people not feel uncomfortable. Fine, do that. There are other ways you can do it. But all these supposed good interventions have unintended consequences, or sometimes probably intended consequences. And I truly do believe, look, this is not a conspiracy. Well, it's going to sound like it's a conspiracy I'm just going to describe. But everything you and I are talking about, I truly do believe, without a doubt, because it's in the APA, it's enshrined, this demasculization of men, okay, it's an active effort. And the policies, the laws, and this APA document, it clearly shows that the way that schools have been organized over the last 20-something years, since the 1990s. And Christina Hoff Sommers, if anyone wants to see what I'm talking about, but see the stats behind it, see the evidence behind it, Christina Hoff Sommers, whom I met at the Quillette thing, and as I told, I've been lecturing about her for 15 or 20 years almost. It was very nice to meet her. She talks about this, and she's been talking about it since she wrote the book Who Stole Feminism. And if anyone really wants to see when this really began in earnest, I recommend to everybody, Google, get the book if you can. I read it like when it first came out, so we're talking like 20-something years ago. I think the math one. Yeah. Okay. Who Stole Feminism? So it's not new. It was going on, but she was a solitary voice, and everyone just wrote her off as some right-wing, anti-female, blah, blah, blah. And now people can find her on the factual feminist. So if you really want to see what's been going on, Kyle, it's been going on for many, many, many years. And the fact is, a lot of women are leading the charge. And what kind of man leads the charge for this? And I hate to sound stereotypical, and I hate to get haters, but let me put my bona fides out there. First of all, I'm left-handed, number one. Right away, that makes me a non-typical male. All right, I'm left-handed. I'm pretty big right now as far as stature, whatever, but I was always when I was younger, I was always very athletic, but I was skinny, very, very skinny, very awkward looking, always had long hair. My mother literally used to dress me up in girls' clothes when I was a baby because she wanted a girl. And everyone thought that I was a girl because I had really long blonde hair, long eyelashes, a feminine face. All right, I was a damn cute girl. Okay, now I've become this. But the point, so that's part of it. My mother opened up Canada's first sex store. She's a woman. She's my idol. You know, I'm a mama's boy now. I can say that. Back in the days, I was a terrible monster to her and to everybody else. Okay. But I can sit in being comfortable saying mama's boy. My brother's gay. My sister's gay. We've talked before about this. Is that right? All this stuff. So I'm putting it out there. I am not your traditional masculine male, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Yeah.
However, I do know that there is a place for the positive aspects of masculinity. And I do know that, that it has been eroded for many years. So here's my question, Kyle. What kind of, we know why women would go ahead and try to change society to be more feminine than masculine, but what kind of a male would go along with that?
Predator.
Okay, that'd be one. Yeah. Predator be one.
It's like Milo Yiannopoulos said, if somebody comes out as a male feminist, you can set the clock to when they're going to be accused of fucking like inappropriate sexual behavior.
Right. Well, that's one type for sure. Yes. Okay. Absolutely. But even then, among the predators, there's some of the predators who they look like really strong, whatever, but they're really predators. But what's the other type of predator? And I hate using these terms, but the only other type of male who go along with that, and they're the same guys who are in all these rallies. They're the same, types of male feminists. And I call myself a male feminist because my definition of feminism is not insane. Right. And I'm going back to the old school. I'm an old guy. I'm going back to when I was right. It was equality. But anyway, the type of man who would go along with this is the type of man who has not benefited from masculinity. I'm not talking toxic masculinity, but he's unathletic, probably not very good looking, might not like he doesn't get the benefits. Girls, we know this, females get the benefit of being beautiful or being sexy or being easy or whatever else. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but we know that they get that benefit. Males get it from being athletic, being handsome, being tall, being funny. There's a few things here. Women don't get it from being funny. Women don't get stature from being funny. They get it from
it's like the conversation between men and women. A man wants a woman who will laugh at his jokes. A woman wants a guy with a sense of humor.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which is why a lot of women aren't funny. Some are. Some of my favorite comedians are funny. Are women. Yeah, some of my favorite comedians are funny. So I'm not, anyway, so the point is, it's a man who has not derived benefit from these things because he can't make it as a man. So of course he wants the rules to change. It levels out the playing field, and people have to recognize that. And if you look at, and I always tell this to people, here's one thing for anyone watching to think about, okay? And I've told this to many people. And if you look at it this way, and it's not, I'm sure other people have said this, I know they have, all right? I always tell people, look at someone today. I don't care if they're 30 years old or 60 years old, all right? If you know how they were in high school, you can get a pretty good idea of how they're functioning now. Now, some people do change after high school for sure, and kids can often do that. Traumatic events can do it. But in many ways, we're not the same people we are, but our dynamics are pretty similar. So if you're some guy who's a heterosexual guy and you didn't make it with the ladies, and now you're in a position where you have some power or whatever else, right? You're not going to handle that position very well, right? You're going to be resentful of beautiful or powerful or successful women because they were the ones who, during your development, during that time when you felt weak, disempowered, pathetic, they were the ones who weren't giving you a time of day and so on. Those things still, you carry them with you even as an adult into your later years. So I always tell people, look at the person now. Don't look at them. I don't care if they have a PhD. I don't care if they're the president of a company. When they were a teenager, if they were a real loser and they never came to terms with that and learned to turn it around, it's going to affect how they are today. Deep down, they're still that little teenager.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why so many of these guys are for all these changes. And and that's the reality. I'm not going to get into the kind of women who do that, but I'll just stick with the men. And so they're only too happy. And guess what? Those kinds of guys are the kinds of guys typically who become psychologists. How many masculine psychologists do you know? Or it's like, not that many. No, of the male psychologists, there aren't that many.
No, not to be rude, but most academics.
And academics as well. Yes, exactly. Yeah, think
Like,
about that. Yeah,
you know,
sorry.
That's an interesting point. That it seems to be. Well, and it's also interesting the points you were making about the structure of school. Because, for instance, I have failed at literally every institution that I've been in. Like every educational institution I've attempted, I've either gotten like low C's or just straight up failed. Yet somehow in the actual world of like working and stuff like that, I seem to be thriving. I thrive in competition, but in a situation where you just have to sit down for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I wonder if that's more of a anecdotal thing or if it's
No, it's a very, if you ask any parent who has a kid with there's two things, either a kid with ADHD or a kind of child who learns through kinesthetic learning. Okay.
Yeah.
They will tell you you're preaching to the choir to them because or they themselves. Anyone who learns not through sitting down, listening and absorbing, but learns from their hands, from being active, they're going to say the same thing. And here's the funny thing, well, it's sad, as Christina Hoff Sommers talks about, when in the 1990s, when the school systems went through a radical change in order to, this again, she writes about this. This is her work. There was a document that was put out. I think I forget who put it out there. It's in her book in 1990s, early 90s, that basically was claiming that girls got the short end of the stick in education. She asked for the data. The data did not show what they claimed. They first of all didn't want to give it to her, and they finally did, and it was a lie. It was a fraud. Yet the Senate, the whatever, whoever does the school boards, whatever, they made all these wholesale changes to education to take care of these poor girls who were not thriving because of this. Okay, it was tilted toward males, so they thought no, it wasn't. Okay, so since then, it's amazing and it's sad that they made this wholesale change to accommodate these girls based on this lie, yet they haven't, to this date that I know of, made accommodations to a certain percentage of kids who learn in a different way, which could be, again, through hands-on learning or whatever. What they have done, at least in Ontario, I don't know, it's like in BC, and I don't want to sound, what's the right word here? I don't want to discriminate, and I might sound like an asshole or an elitist for saying this, but I'm going to tell you, there's a reason we used to have, at least in high schools and other schools, streams. Okay. Yeah. Now, I don't say put the stream from grade 1. I don't say, okay, look at the child's eye color. You're blue. You're the superior race. Go in this stream. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if by high school a child shows that they really can't cope with the same normal system that everyone else does, why leave them in the same class? It destroys their sense of self because they can't keep up. And because they feel bad, or if they have ADHD and they're not, and they're not getting the type of learning that they need, or if they're kinesthetic and they don't get that, they're disrupting the class. Why allow one person to destroy education for everyone else? But our fucking idiotic education systems go, no, we're going to de-stream. We're going to put all these kids together. And so that way they're going to feel included and they're not going to feel excluded. Feeling excluded as a teen or as a child is the worst thing. We're social animals, and most of the people I know who have serious issues, whether it's drug addiction or anything else, they say they always felt like an outsider. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But throwing them in with everybody, they're going to be excluded afterwards because people are going to go, fuck off, you're interfering with us, or they're going to relate to it in a way.
You're an idiot.
You're an idiot, yeah.
It's like in all of my math classes, English class, like I'm a good writer, but specifically in lyrics, not so much any formal style of writing. In all of those like academic courses, I was an example of a kid who just could not keep pace. But then you threw me in things like cooking, woodworking, fucking drama, music, any of that stuff. And all of a sudden I'm straight A's all the way through. And, and it's like, it seems to me like that change in Canada really just threw a wrench in our society in a rather drastic way.
And it's funny because we're going back and forth. The states, I think, they're a bit behind us in this regard, but the pendulum keeps swinging. So we're back now. I think there's a tension, okay? And I can't speak for all provinces, but I know in Ontario, there's a tension between university, and I know the states call everything college, and so they have, I guess, community college or something, but between university and college. So of course, historically, it's always been, you know, the best people go to universities, the dummies or the losers, whatever, go to college. And then a few years ago, they said, wait a second, college is actually teaching far more helpful things than university could. And a lot of smart people were going to college because I want to actually learn, you know, practical things, not theory. You know, I want to learn how to get a job. I want to learn how to, you know, to channel my talents properly. So then there's a shift to college, and colleges were getting a lot of money. Again, I'm talking Ontario here, a lot of money put into them. Their stature was rising. And so there's still a bit of prejudice. You know, people still have a bit of prejudice, but more and more people are recognizing that college is a viable option. Well, and I think people should continue to do that. And now more colleges have accreditation that allows them to give out degrees rather than diplomas, etc. But here's the thing. We need to also bring back pride in trade schools. Forget just college.
Oh, yeah.
Plumbers make far more money than most, you know, professionals and other things, right? And plumbing, and my wife knows this. You know, she jokes about this all the time. I'm the anti-handyman. You know, my mother's, you know, husband, second husband, he's very good with his hand. He's self-taught, whatever. I used to help him all the time, but I never got into it and learned from him. I just did what he told me to do. And I regret that because you know, so I always tell my wife, okay, well, I might not have the skills in the hands, but you know what? This makes me the money that I can hire somebody to do it. Yeah. And, you know, and I don't begrudge that person being able to do it as long as they don't rip me off. And my friends who are handy, I'm in awe of them. I was like, fuck, man. You know, I'm not jealous of them. I'm so proud of them. It's like, you're doing something that I would never be able to do. And maybe I'm sure I could learn to do it one day, but I just don't have that inclination. But I respect people who do.
It's almost as if people have unique, like, talents and abilities that allow them to rise in various hierarchies, and we need that. It's
weird.
It's weird. Like, I'm probably never gonna be a politician or a lawyer, despite my love of arguing. I fucking love it. On a technical level, I enjoy that. Right? But I'm never gonna be a lawyer. I can't function in an institution well enough to be able to go do that. But I got a knack for building stuff, farming food, you know, like I can do all sorts of like handy shit. But I'm never gonna be a psychologist. I can get a gist of the idea by having conversations like this, but it's like, we need psychologists. We need musicians to a degree. Maybe I'm inflating my own sense of self-importance here, but, you know, like,
yeah, no, it's true. And so why are we being so arrogant and saying this is more valuable than that? And, you know, the arts, some of the arts are self-indulgent and don't bring any joy or benefit to anybody, right? And some of the arts, and I'm not sucking up to you, but we know for a fact, music, we know, benefits people. The power of music. If anyone doesn't believe it, fuck, I think it's called something inside. Damn it. I should know this. I've talked about it so many times. It's a documentary. Just type in like music, autism, dementia, Alzheimer's, headphones. So they took, and I think I talked about this, something about inside, or it has to do with that. Again, I'm blaming my meds because it really has fucked up my memory. If anyone goes to docamitay.com, on my podcast, The Real Reality, the second podcast I did was all about music. I had an old friend of mine who she's very much into music as a science and as a performer. In any event, so we were talking about that, and they took music from these people with Alzheimer's who were lost to the world. I don't know if it was only Alzheimer's or severe dementia, but I'm pretty sure it was Alzheimer's. They put on these headphones, playing songs from their past, and they came alive again. And they became, like, they connected. And they were people who were unreachable. And music did that. So yes, so I don't want to suck up, but yeah, music is an important art. A lot of art is art. You know, but are we promoting that? No, we're promoting, you know, these types of, I won't denigrate any particular field, but we know that a lot of money is going into things that is not going to do anybody any good. And all it's doing is, you know, it's fostering the sense of, I would say, more exclusion, that these people are going into these things. They know that they're being surrounded by a bunch of other people who could, you know, misfits, right? And I love misfits. I was a misfit in my way, right? You know, but I was never a misfit who felt excluded. I was a misfit who found a way to make it in these groups. And guess what? I had the biggest mouth around. I was always the class clown. I was always the worst student in the school. Like, I was always on the shit list and everything like that. I had to go to 3 different high schools. And I learned to navigate. Nobody coddled me. Nobody protected me. You know, when I fucked up, my mother was the first to come down on me, and she came down harder than any school or police ever could. And I learned that. And we're not doing that. What we're saying is, to all the misfits, or to all the people who, you know, are saying it's not your fault, don't worry about anything, just fuck all these people. They're mean, evil, patriarchal men, whatever, and it's their fault. So don't worry, don't work on yourselves. And we need to help people work on themselves. If you're a misfit, you probably have some ability, some talent, something that would benefit others. You know, learn to harvest that, learn to use it and cultivate it, and learn to connect with people in some ways through that. And that's right now. Anyway, and we're doing the opposite of that basically in society today.
Seems like it. So
anyway, that was a false ending. Half an hour ago, you gave that false ending, and then
I know I do that literally all the time. I'm like, so we're gonna call it good here, and then I talk for another 45 minutes. Or I play music for another 45 minutes. So why don't we try to actually give this one we'll call it a close, give a lot of people something to think about for a while. And we'll touch base on this topic in a few months, because this APA thing, well, I want to see how it kind of shakes out. And I feel like, given that you work in that field, you're probably going to be the best person to talk to about this for kind of.
And I'm also going to be the person that you know who's speaking out publicly against it. I don't know anyone else who's doing that publicly. I did 2 radio interviews last week about it, and or one this week, one last week, just slammed the thing, and the Gillette ad or whatever. So yeah, so I'm not just somebody who's watching it. I'm involved in it. I'm fighting against it, and and as long as they haven't taken me down yet. So I'll tell you what I find in the next couple of months, and all right.
Sounds good. Do you want to plug anything before we go? I put your website in the description, but maybe just.
Oh, that's pretty much it. Doc Amitay as .com, Doc Amitay on YouTube, Doc Amitay on Twitter. Just check me out, follow me, support what I do if you believe in it, right? And because we need to encourage more people to speak out. And I always say this: people who have podcasts like what you're doing, speaking out, getting other people involved, finding a place where people can coalesce. And that's it. People need a sense of community. People need a sense of, I'm not the only person going through this. And maybe all my neighbors, maybe all my coworkers, maybe all my classmates think I'm an asshole because I'm daring to go against the grain. But if I look a little bit, it's not that far, I find, oh, here's somebody who's doing the same thing. He's in a different country, or he's a different whatever. But so, that's, I always encourage people to do this. And I hope more people will be inspired by what you're doing, by what I'm doing, what others are doing, So anyway, and then in the end, go Canada, because despite all this, still, we're so blessed to be in such a great country.
Canada is fantastic. Fantastic, despite our governing office. So I'm going to leave it with Burning A 2019.
Okay. And I'm going to leave it with, all right.